Today we're going to discuss thesis statement. Now, many students, I myself included, when I first took composition in college, get very afraid when they hear this word thesis statement. You know, what is it? You heard it maybe in high school, or you might remember hearing it, but you never really knew what it was. You wrote them, you think, you put them in your intros, but you didn't know. Well, today what we want to do is really simplify this idea of thesis statement, because really the idea of it is a very simple idea, and just like the essay, which we will talk about a little later, and the intro, which we already discussed, it's very natural what a thesis statement is. We all think deductively, like we discussed in our introductions, and the thesis statement, if you remember from our introduction lecture, is that last sentence in that general to specific introduction in the intro. So it is the most specific sentence in the introduction. So, we want to really, focus in on that idea of specific today. Now, to be able to create a thesis statement, you have to be able to define what it is. You have to know what it is in order to actually be able to, write one. You might be able to quote a dictionary definition of a thesis statement, or a definition of another word from a dictionary or a book or somewhere else. However, if you can't put something really into your own words, you really don't understand what it means, let alone would you be able to create one. So today we're going to try to facilitate everyone's creation of their own definition of a thesis statement. You want to make the thesis statement your own so that you can create one in any situation, writing situation that you might find yourself in. And as we've discussed and will continue to discuss in this series, essays all have thesis statements of some kind. So it's a very important concept. So let's begin with this idea of how to define a thesis statement. Let's talk about some words, just single words that describe what a thesis statement is. First, we use the word specific, right? It's the opposite of general. General being very broad, specific being very small, like on one point. General being the Milky Way galaxy, specific being, ECPI, Virginia Beach campus, room 412. I mean, that's general to specific. So, another word that, many people use to describe thesis statement is the word map. Map, well, yes. A thesis statement can be a map for your readers so that they can understand how to read your paper. It leads them, as a map leads somebody on a journey through that paper. If it's an argument, which you have a position on, your thesis many times will let your reader know your position so that they know where it's coming from. This will help you, depending on how you set up an argument, prove that thesis statement within the paper. So we've got map, we've got specific. Focus. Focus is a great word. It's the best word I've ever come across to really describe what a thesis statement is. When you think about focus, you might think of a camera lens. We have a lot of digital cameras now, so we might not have the lenses that we turn, but everybody remembers like the 35mm cameras with the big lens that you turn, back and forth, and it makes the aperture of the lens change its size so that, the image comes in focus and out of focus. So let's think about that when we think about thesis statement. So when we have it really fuzzy, we've got our general sentences at the beginning of our intro, and the more we turn that lens, the more it focuses in on that image so that it can be seen very sharply. And if you think about resolution on a computer screen to get it perfect. So, you keep turning that lens, like in your intro, you keep getting more specific until you snap tight and the image is crystal clear. That's your thesis statement, that crystal clear sentence that tells your readers exactly what the paper is going to be about. You have all of these fuzzy colors and everything, but when you turn that lens perfectly, it all makes sense. That's kind of what your thesis statement will do. Now, another good thing about this image, or this idea of focus when we're talking about thesis statement, is it tells you, how far to go. Because as you know, once you get that image tight, you can keep turning it and go too far in the other direction. So a thesis statement could, in some instances, be too specific. Now, the level of specificity in your thesis statement is usually decided by the length of the paper or the amount of space that you have to prove that thesis statement. So, if you have a 2 to 3 page paper, as in your first assignment, which we will discuss in the next, let's say, lecture on essays, then your thesis will be very specific. But if you've got a 50-page paper, which you won't while you're here, but if you have a 50-page paper to write, you can't have the same thesis statement that you would have in a 2-page paper, because you're going to find you're going to be saying the same things over and over and over again. So the tighter the picture gets, the smaller the space it will take to prove that picture. So we think about that. So those are words that we use to describe what a thesis statement is. Let's talk about what a thesis statement does. We can use some of the same words. It leads the reader. It might explain to the reader what the paper will be about. Give them a tight, very specific background on what it would be about. We already talked about focus. It focuses the reader's attention. It might sometimes, and we will discuss this towards the end of this series, it might ask a question. Sometimes it might answer a question that your reader already has, or it might tell your reader that the answer to a question that he or she has is going to be found somewhere in that paper. Everything in the intro, and specifically that thesis, points that reader into that paper. So it is that one sentence that encompasses everything that that essay will be about. Now, in your first essay, which we will discuss the essay structure in the next lecture, the thesis statement has two parts. And that is basically the event part and the result part. If you have an essay about an event that changed your life, you have to tell somebody what the event is and what the change is so that they can see it. So if the event is an accident that made you afraid to drive, okay, here's an accident, now I'm afraid to drive. You put those together in a sentence. If not for this accident, I would not be afraid to drive. That's very specific. You might even get more specific and focus in more. If it was not for this specific accident, you might not use those words, but if it wasn't for the car accident I had on Holland Road after my birthday party in 1999, I would not be petrified to get behind the wheel of a car today. Now that's very specific. And in a 2 to 3 page paper, you could elaborate and explain and prove that thesis within the essay itself. And again, we will talk about that essay structure in the next lecture. But as you can see, that statement focuses your reader in on everything that you might have talked about in that introduction, and it points them and leads them in a general direction to what is going to be encompassed or what that paper will be about. So now I would encourage you to try to use the terms that we've mentioned about what a thesis statement is and what it does, and come up with some of your own to write a definition of what a thesis statement is. A thesis statement is a sentence that can answer questions, direct your reader, and focus them in on a topic. But you want to write your own definition, and it can vary. You might have a generic definition that you use all of the time, and then it might change a little bit from paper to paper depending on the writing situation that you find yourself in. We will discuss thesis statement each time we have a different type of essay because the specific type of thesis varies. Today we just talked about what a thesis statement is, and we tried to define it. It's a very specific statement, a sentence, that tells your reader exactly what the paper is going to be about and gives them a direction in which to read that paper. Thank you. And remember, in our next lecture, we will be discussing the essay structure.